What's up, people? Welcome to the I Am Conquering Mountains podcast. I'm your host, I Am Conquering Mountains. We have a wonderful guest here with us today to to share some insight on some things that she has endured, but also to give you a few tools you can put into your toolbox to help you overcome any hardships that you are enduring. This person is a friend of mine. She's a sister in Christ. She is beautiful in all of the work that she does. She married my brother in Christ, so I'm definitely appreciative of that. And they have a beautiful family together with the two of them. They are so beautiful together, and we definitely appreciate all the work that she is doing. And she is a licensed clinical professional counselor, and her name is Melanie Coates.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us and taking the time out of your day to come in and be on the I Am Conquering Mountains podcast. Many people are enduring a great deal of hardships, even during this pandemic. Me being a school counselor, I've seen it with my students. Some students who haven't ever had any hardships are now experiencing loss for the first time.
Mm.
Parents are experiencing financial difficulties for the first time. So I feel like a lot of people in the world today are suffering. So what I'm hoping to do with this podcast is to kind of get guests in to come in and share some insight on some things that they have been through, but also leave some tools people can put into their toolbox to help them overcome as well.
Absolutely.
So you're a licensed clinical professional counselor. Congratulations on getting your license recently.
Yes, absolutely. It's been a long time coming.
Quite the journey, quite the journey. I remember getting my school counseling license, and it just felt like forever. Those
Yeah.
little 3.5 years felt like it took way too long than it should have.
Uh-huh. That's how
Um,
it is sometimes, but we just keep pressing on.
right. And speaking of pressing on, I remember, I think it was like a year or two ago. I want to say 2 years ago. And the reason why I wanted to get you in and have this conversation with you today is because a couple of years ago, you did an Instagram, Facebook Live discussion, and you were highlighting domestic violence.
Hmm.
And you shared your own personal story as well and gave some insights on some of those things that you have been through. And I know you do a lot of work with the church, with women dealing with domestic violence as well. And we'll touch on that a bit later as well, too. But one thing that you had mentioned uh, in your testimony was about financial abuse when it comes to domestic violence. And I
Mm.
feel like that kind of gets overshadowed by the physical and
Mm.
even the psychological. People may even like touch on the emotional, and you probably have more experience in talking about this than I do.
Yeah.
Um, but do you think that financial abuse gets overshadowed a bit by the physical and the emotional and the psychological?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the physical is sometimes a little bit more seen. It's out there in the open. And then now that mental health and, therapy is kind of coming around full circle, we hear a lot more about emotional, mental abuse. But the financial piece, I think maybe there's a part of, like shame there that we really
Mhm.
don't talk about with the
Right.
financial abuse. So it's definitely been under. Um, Publicized as much as possible. I think I remember um, Serena Williams. She had this ad that came out several years ago, and I can't think it was maybe Carrie Washington too with the
Okay.
purple purse. Yeah, it was a purple purse awareness where it's talking about the purple, of course, with domestic violence, and then the purse with the finances and how the two kind
Mhm.
of go hand in hand. Yeah, it's one of those things that we do need to talk about a little bit more because it's definitely rampant. Um,
Absolutely. So, for people who may not know what financial abuse is or what it looks like, from your perspective and from your opinion, can you give a definition or some kind of understanding of what financial abuse is?
it's similar to some of the others. It definitely has that manipulation and control piece to it,
Right.
but it's with your finances, it's with your credit, where that information is maybe gathered from a perpetrator, whether
Mhm.
it's family or it's a significant other or someone very close to you. And the financial piece is them being able to kind of manipulate the usage of
Mhm.
your finances and maybe even coercing you to do things that you wouldn't necessarily do. spending your
Right,
money
right.
on things, or running up your credit, that sort of deal. So it's kind of behind the scenes, but it definitely can ruin your credit. And it, like
Yeah.
I said, it's definitely, it's a shame piece, because you've
Mhm.
kind of allowed someone to kind of come in, someone that you trusted, and you've kind of opened up this side of yourself, your
Mhm.
money, your wealth, your um, even things like knowing the type of car that you drive, and using that as a manipulating factor on you being
Right.
able to do things because you drive a certain type of car. So yeah.
So does this like with financial abuse, it doesn't have to be your partner?
I don't think it has to be your partner.
Okay.
I've definitely seen it in, domestic, as far as like family
Okay.
abuse as well. But I mean, more often than not, it probably would be with your partner, significant
Okay.
other, spouse. Yeah.
Right. So when people talk about like the warning signs, right? Like what are some of the warning signs that somebody could look for and see, okay,
Mhm.
well, this is a red flag.
Um, I'll give you my red flags.
Okay.
I'll
I
give
was
you
I was
my
segueing into
I'll
that.
give you my personal red flags.
Okay.
At the time, I was blessed to be driving, a luxury vehicle, a Mercedes, and I never thought I'd be able to get something like that, but
Mhm.
God blessed me, and blessed my credit score to be well enough to do that. And
Mhm.
so I met somebody like really, really fast through another person in the
Mhm.
church, and it just got really clingy extremely fast, where they were wanting to like bond and connect with me and be, like in my life, and make this a commitment, like we're in this
Mhm.
relationship together. And it just made it feel as though the warning sign was them wanting to, what do you call it? Um, put themselves into my life.
Okay.
Put
Right.
themselves into my life and put our finances together, and be
So like open up joint bank accounts.
transparent.
Okay.
Yeah, being open and transparent with what you spend your money on, what are you buying, how can you afford these types of things. You must have good credit if you're able
Mhm.
to drive the vehicle that you have. If you do have that, then maybe you should be able to buy me these
Okay.
things.
So
You
did
should
this
have a car.
person like match you as far as like finances, or are they not as financially successful as you?
No, they weren't they weren't as
Okay.
as successful. But I think for a lot of people, you do have to know where you are
Mhm.
mentally, emotionally, and what your focus is on. Because at that point, I was, a little bit old, and I was like waiting for the relationship to come around. And so when someone is inserting themselves into your life and making it seem as though this is a relationship that is going to answer all of your prayers, and they
Mhm.
use, God and your spiritual life to say, God has really brought us together. This is something that, we really need to get going and move it. It's moving
Mhm.
really fast. You're like, well, perhaps this is, but
Right, and I can understand that
yeah.
because, we often like I remember when I was, looking for that one God had created for me and, I was looking for the right one and I was praying for the right one. I can definitely see how, as someone is sharing that same sentiment with you, even if
Mhm.
they are using it as to gain some type of advantage of you,
Yeah.
or from to try to manipulate you in a sense. I can see like how somebody would want to kind of say, "Oh, okay, well maybe this is the guy or the girl that's made for
Mhm.
me."
Yeah. A
Mhm.
counterfeit.
Yeah, the
they,
counterfeit.
they were a counterfeit. It seemed to be the right thing, but it wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned that this person that well, I know you do like a lot of work for sisters in the church, right? Where you have
Mhm.
the sisters with a purpose that's designed to bring hope, healing, and purpose to the lives of women. And then you also have that you are the founder of the Survival Sisters Peaceful Oasis, which is a domestic violence organization designed to empower women, educate churches, and highlight domestic violence in Christian homes and relationships. Um, when I was looking at your, and by the way, congratulations on all your accolades. I was looking at, the accolades. I was like, man, this is a tough resume right here to
Oh
match.
my gosh.
Because you have a lot of successes and stuff like that. You're a published author. You have
Mhm,
your books and stuff like that. But with the groups, with the women, with the domestic violence group, especially,
mhm.
um, when when you're meeting with those individuals, are you sharing your testimony, and like what kind of insight are you giving them to help them overcome their hardships too?
Yeah, good question. The Survival Sisters Peaceful Oasis, that was birthed out of a desire to help women in the church who felt as though they were being silenced when it came to their
Mm.
own personal stories of abuse. Um, and at one point, I felt like I was the preacher's wife whisperer because I
Yeah.
found that a lot of preachers' wives are
Ah,
being like abused emotionally, maybe even
wow.
physically abused, by their
Yeah.
husbands that made preachers in the church. And you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And so
Right.
more of the meeting time with them was um, I would start doing like workshops
Okay.
at ladies' days and sisters meetings and conferences where I would kind of sit down with them in their actual ladies' Bible class, and we just have, a personal one-on-one, talk about what's really
Mhm.
going on, like what are the signs, and not being ashamed. And growing up in a family where there was abuse, domestic violence, my mom experienced it. I witnessed
Mhm.
it. My grandmother experienced it. I didn't witness that, but she was married a couple of times, and all of the husbands, were abusive.
Right.
And so when I would take that story, to church and, want assistance, that they weren't either learned, it was kind of pushed under the rug. And so I just felt like it was just a time to kind of, expose that this is happening and help sisters have a safe space
Mhm.
to be able to share their stories. And yeah, you'd be amazed that some of the sisters older, senior
Right.
sisters, senior
Right.
saints that had never shared their story. So
Right.
yeah.
Wow. So like what was like the feedback at the beginning when you started?
You know what? Actually, it was some good feedback. And what I learned is that it was accepted. It was an
Nice.
accepted conversation because it was coming at a time where you would see it in the media a little bit more. You got to thank
Mhm.
God for media sometimes. I know social media a lot of times gets a bad rap, but it did kind of open the door for the conversations to be had. And so
Mhm.
if you're hearing, sports and other people, celebrities dealing with domestic violence, then it is definitely a conversation that the church should be having. And
Right.
so that it was definitely an accepted, and I was being asked to come to more places, congregations especially, to speak to the sisters, give them encouragement,
Mhm.
also give them tools if they knew of anybody that was experiencing it, and like legal resources in their
Right.
own personal communities,
Right.
right? And how to be sensitive to certain situations where it could be physical and it can put
Mhm.
people in great danger.
That is powerful, man. Because I think about like, well, me being a minister in the church, I feel like sometimes we can kind of hide some of the things that we're enduring because we don't want people to know. But I
Mm,
look at the church as, a place where we should have like the greatest resources. I mean, we have
mhm,
some of the greatest resources right in the church, right? So I feel like that should be a place where we all kind of connect and share those experiences. But I feel like a lot of times we kind of hold back from sharing those experiences. I mean, I remember my own testimony dealing with like anxiety and witnessing domestic violence in my own household. I
mhm,
was very hesitant to share those things at first, of fear of judgment and being like ridiculed or exiled or whatnot, or talked about even.
mhm.
But for you to go in and say, "Hey, this is my story. This is what I'm doing," and even to get the reception back shows that that was some really great and powerful connections that you made as well too.
Yeah. I think the conversation will continue, and I
Mhm.
think what would be a great thing for, ministers like yourself and just other churches is just even if you're not necessarily having the deep, hard conversations, maybe creating like a resource library, which is something
Mhm.
that I wanted to,
Nice.
help them do. Is here are, we have the other types of tracks and stuff we put up with,
Right, right.
information in your community about domestic violence agencies. Here are the shelters,
Mhm.
emergency numbers if someone, whether it's a congregant or a visitor that's coming in and
Mhm.
they're experiencing these things, at least you kind of have it kind of passively posted somewhere to show
Right.
that are sensitive to this need in the
Right.
community.
Right, because I think like a lot of people who may visit are coming, and even people who are members are coming to get the word. They coming to get the message, but people are
Mm.
also coming to get help from situations that they're enduring. Maybe they lost a job and they need financial support or an opportunity to find a job, schooling and education and things of that nature. But also in relationship building and also gaining those that insight about the warning signs of domestic violence and stuff like that, and where people can go within their own community. That's why I feel like the churches should be like one of the greatest resource centers that's out there in the world, because we have so many different people from all walks of life, from different professions, from different
Mhm.
experiences that can give that insight about where to go, when to go, and how to get there and overcome those battles to help people conquer those mountains that are coming through. So I definitely applaud you and thank you for the work that you're doing with that as well.
Thank you.
Uh, and you mentioned that your sisters with a purpose. What's the goal for that group?
So that was a past ministry
Okay.
that I started and co-founded, but some of the principles I still use today. SWAP Ministry, Sisters with a Purpose. It was designed to bring hope, healing, and purpose to the lives of women, kind of for the
Mhm.
same reason, just seeing the need, um, in the church and communities of
Mhm.
faith to be able to kind of talk about some deep topics. And so the goal of that was just to create like inspirational messages, a blog,
Mhm.
um, resources for women that are just kind of really struggling and needing an outlet outside of, Sunday and Wednesday gathering times
Right.
to be able to, hear that there, are ways to just kind of cope with, anxiety, depression,
Right.
other types of, fears and doubts, in a safe and encouraging environment.
Right.
With that ministry, it was co-founded with my best friend at the time, and she was like a speaker. She a very motivational
Okay.
speaker, and I was like the poet, of the group,
Nice.
dynamic duo. And
Mm.
so we would, take a scriptural theme or topic, whatever the ladies' day or conference wanted,
Mhm.
and she would deliver a message, and I would deliver a spoken word poetry piece to that specific topic, just to inspire and encourage the women, just to kind of
Right.
um, work through some of their challenges in life. And it was very powerful and moving.
Yeah.
And that's where one of my books was developed from that ministry.
I was just about to
Um,
mention that too.
yes, it's over. Finding
Yep.
freedom by breaking negative strongholds. We're
Mhm.
telling Satan that it's over. You've been in a relationship with him for far too long, and it's time to kind of. We created an acronym for stronghold. Start relying on God and hold on, right?
Mhm.
So that you can kind of release yourself from some of those things that are holding you back spiritually. So that's been what since 2012 since that was published. So it's
Right.
been a little bit of time, but definitely the principles still
Yeah.
apply today. Hmm.
Definitely. I mean, that's a lot of powerful work as well too, to come up with a whole book
Yeah,
from the group and the stories that they share and stuff like that. So definitely commend you on that.
thank you.
Um, Going back to your experience dealing with domestic violence and abuse and stuff,
Mhm.
how did you come around to saying like, okay, this is enough. This is what I signed up for.
As far as my personal life
Hmm.
experiencing it, well, I experienced, that vicariously, the domestic violence, because my mom was abused, and I know she doesn't mind me sharing that part.
Right.
That's her story. I can't tell her story, right?
Hey.
I can only speak to myself. I think at the point when I was, preteen, teenager, and really just needing the church to support us. at that time, and we needed them one time to help pay a light bill.
Hmm.
And, you feel like, the collection is for the saints. And here I am, a saint. My mom wasn't as faithful. And, just really needing the support of the congregation. And when they didn't really know how to approach it or do it or support, um, I felt as though God was just, like moving me to like start something, in my heart to kind of help churches, like educate them on things that they
Yeah.
may be missing. And so that just kind of went into like high school when I was taking a psychology class, and that's what made me want to get into this area of therapy so that
Right.
I can kind of go back and kind of help women and girls and whomever, men too,
Right.
with their own personal struggles so that, so they can get some relief and like be delivered from, these situations that are just really, really horrible and sometimes just help like behind the scenes. We don't talk about that
Mhm.
stuff in church.
Right, right. I kind of feel like we kind of overshadow it a little bit too, that it's not as discussed as much. I
Yeah.
don't like what do you think holds people back from sharing those testimonies?
I think because personally from the people that may be sharing the testimonies, feeling as though they may be judged
Hmm.
by the church. You have to come, you have to be perfect.
Yeah.
You can't be found in a relationship that's not of God.
Hmm.
That's maybe what's taught, and they may shy away and don't want to be a burden or responsibility to people, other people in the church, and maybe from a leadership standpoint, just not really understanding how to talk about the hard topics, and domestic
Hmm.
abuse. I experienced that vicariously as a child, but I experienced
Yeah.
sexual abuse,
Mm.
and then of course emotional and
Yeah.
financial abuse as well. And so, how many times do you hear that really talked about from the pulpit, right?
Right.
So
Right.
it's just difficult, and you can't expect the church to give attention to every single topic, but at
Hmm.
least have some education on it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So how do you like? Do you ever have times where? Because I remember like looking back on some of the experiences that I've had, and
Mhm.
for a second I can kind of sink down into like a depression or or a moment of sadness. Like, do you ever have those moments where you're looking back at what you've been through and it's like, ah, man, I wish I had a done X, Y, and Z, or maybe I should have taken this step or that step.
Hindsight is 2020.
Okay.
When you're looking at things now, it's definitely clearer to see what, steps you probably could have taken or should have taken.
Hmm.
Yeah, there could be some disappointment in your life when you start thinking about what direction your life kind of took off on. But I feel as though you were led to the experiences that you were led to for a reason.
Right, right.
And I think I dealt with a lot of low self-esteem when I was younger that,
Mhm.
I just needed to kind of figure out a way to kind of shift that so that I wouldn't allow those situations to keep me from being purposeful in ministry. Because I mean, I was depressed. I was taking medication for that in
Mhm.
young adulthood, right when I got into college. And then after a while, I just, had to be taught and encouraged to kind of pull myself through that. So I didn't do it alone, of course.
Right.
But, I know that those challenges come for many of us. And the obstacle of, abuse or even the obstacle of anxiety and depression and really trying to overcome that, it can be kind of lonely. It can
Yeah.
be lonely sometimes because you don't know
Right.
who to talk to or who to trust. And so,
Right. And like what positive outlets do you use to kind of keep yourself going, or did you use to keep yourself going during that time?
I think, it's kind of changed. Definitely, I use the poetry.
Okay.
I believe that's a gift that God gave me to kind of pull through because usually every time I was having to write something, it was a situation that I had dealt with
Yeah.
in my life. And so it made me kind of go into the scriptures and kind of find some refreshment there. Hanging out with my friends, from church
Mhm.
or, people in the community, just getting encouragement from them. I think now just being more cognizant that everybody's going through something
Yeah.
and being available and being seen. I think that's one thing that I always kind of keep at the forefront I remember, if I can tell a real quick story,
Oh,
there was an older brother, at the church, and you would go, at the beginning of service, and they do like a love feast. You go and hug everybody. And
mhm.
this brother, he was moving so fast. He said, "Hey, how you doing, sister?" And before I could tell him I wasn't doing good, he was like, "Okay, good, very good. All right, talk to you later."
Yeah, right, right.
And I'm thinking, I'm not doing good today.
Yeah.
And I really needed someone to see me and like pause and
Mhm.
stop. And so that's been a part of just my lifestyle now, is that I want to pause and stop when I see people and really see how they're doing. Ask them, "Are you
Right,
okay? Is there something that you need?" Because people are coming there with their own struggles, and we could kind of, in a sense, lead them into deeper depression or deeper
right.
anxiety when we kind of ignore the need that's maybe right there in our faces.
Yeah, they say like what Sunday is one of the most hypocritical days
Oh,
of the week
mm,
because we come there as if everything is all hunky dory, everything is fine, everything is
mhm,
great, but then it's
mhm,
not so great, and people will say, "Oh, I'm okay," or "I'm doing fine."
mhm,
No, I don't need anything, but in
mhm.
reality, they need a whole lot, and oftentimes they need somebody to even ask,
That's
"How are
right.
you doing?" Or "Let's talk, let's chat."
Mhm,
So I definitely appreciate that piece because I'm definitely take that tool and put it into my own toolbox, and definitely make sure because the anxiety kind of gets to me a little bit, the social anxiety.
mhm,
Back,
mhm.
a few years ago, just doing this never would have happened. Being around two people is too many people for me.
Yeah.
But now that I'm more comfortable, definitely need to take that into consideration as well. And I think
Mhm,
kind of like with COVID, we kind of have gotten used to going back into our own corners and gotten comfortable being away from people. And now we're
mhm.
always questioning whether or not somebody may have some sickness. A sneeze can clear out the room now.
That's right.
you know?
I
But
don't
definitely
want
checking,
it.
yeah, definitely checking in on people is something that's definitely
Yeah.
needed in the church as well too to make sure people are doing okay. Because I'm a
Mhm.
former athlete. I can often lie to myself and say, "Yeah, I can do one more rep," when really I need to stop, like right
Yes.
now.
You've done enough.
Right, right. So, like with the poetry, right? So, do you have
Mhm.
your book still published? Is it still out?
The book is still out.
Okay.
It's through Bookstand Publishing. It
Okay.
should be still available on Amazon. I don't have any personal copies like right now, as I hadn't had too many
Okay.
speaking engagements.
Hmm.
So my bookshelf is, personal bookshelf is empty, but definitely Amazon. Um, Unashamed, Revealing Truth, and it's under my maiden name, Melanie Joyce Johnson. So if you look for it there, it should still be able to order it
Okay. And
there.
I'll post
Mhm.
the link to it when I post the video as well in the podcast on the podcast.
Okay.
Couple with just one or two more questions I got for you, and then I promise I'll let you go.
Okay.
Um, you're recently married. How long has it been now?
This month makes 6 months.
6 months.
We newlyweds.
Brand
We
new.
brand new.
Brand new. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
great though. That's great. You guys are beautiful. Was it hard trying to trust another partner when you came out of some of those relationships?
Um, I don't I was about to say I don't know. I don't think
Mhm,
so. But then my husband is somebody that he wants the communication. I think he
mhm,
was raised to communicate, communicate, communicate. And so sometimes I would, be able to sit back and listen. The therapy part of me is, allow them to talk.
mhm.
But then at the beginning, I wasn't really sharing, you know
Okay.
as much of myself, and really being
Mhm.
open with that, and, talking about myself as much. And, he kind of called me out, kind of called me out
Yeah.
on that, early on. And I don't know if it was fear that I would be hurt, because like when I met him, he was definitely someone that I knew that I could trust. I
Mhm.
guess I just felt like it was in the past, and is it necessary to bring up that pain,
Okay.
to someone
Yeah.
else. And
Right.
so, it wasn't necessarily was hard to trust. It was just like maybe trying to figure out how to navigate that in a relationship. Sometimes
Mhm.
they say don't bring up so much stuff, issues from your past, but I do think it's necessary in a
Mhm.
marriage, so that your husband or your spouse, they know what your experiences are. Some of the the sexual abuse,
Right.
that stuff can come back up, in a marriage,
Right. Right.
right? And you can have
Right.
flashbacks of things. And so you want to make sure that your closeness and your intimacy
Mhm.
isn't affected, and that they know, that maybe this is because of something that they experienced in their past. So
Right.
definitely, it's still an adjustment. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's still an adjustment. He, adjusting to me, and I'm adjusting to him. But it's
Right.
really a beautiful thing.
Right. I feel like that lays the foundation for a relationship and a marriage too, where you get to kind of know, those hidden details about one another, and it helps you to kind of grow, and builds a solid foundation, especially around Christ,
Mhm.
as well too, knowing that you can trust your partner. I've had to trust my wife with a lot of the things that I've endured that I didn't want to talk about, but my wife is kind of like, she wants to know right now, like, what is wrong with you right now.
Mhm.
And
That's me.
Ye yeah.
What's going on?
Right. No
Mhm.
time to think about it. I need to know now.
Yeah.
But her support has definitely been a blessing. She's the one who encouraged me to go and talk to someone about counseling and stuff like that, and about, well, not about counseling, but go to counseling, and get some help with some of the anxiety and PTSD that I was dealing with as well too.
Mhm.
Um, but I often feel like if I don't know if I'm oversharing or I'm sharing too much, but I don't often question whether or not I'm having her to support me too much, right?
Mhm.
Um, is that something that you've dealt with now that you are married and in this beautiful relationship with your husband, that he's that supporter, he wants to encourage you,
Mhm.
um, but is there ever a time where you kind of feel like, I feel like sometimes I'm a burden to her because
Mhm.
because she has to support me so much in my own stuff. But is
Mhm.
that something that you've dealt with yourself, or has know someone else that has dealt with some of those things too?
Yeah, it's definitely worth having a conversation about. It can happen. I was about to ask you, what's too much support?
Yeah.
But then again, one thing that I've kind of learned just in my relationship, in therapy with my clients and just people that I know, is asking the
Mhm.
question, um, do you want my advice or do you want me to listen?
Mm.
Right? And so now this person knows how to support you in this situation. So if you're sharing something that's really hard, and they're used to giving advice, you may not
Mhm.
need the advice right now. Just
Yeah.
need somebody just to hear you out and,
Right.
be a sounding board. And so that support can look that way. And sometimes you just
Mhm.
really you need help navigating situations or struggles, and you need that person's input. They may not
Right.
have the total exact answer, but I think if you're able to sit down with your partner and say, I really need some help. What do you think?
Right.
Then you should be able to kind of start providing that for you. And I think prayer is really powerful in this area,
Mhm.
um, because sometimes you may not know how to support, and you may feel like you're the one that is a burden because you don't know how to support them.
Mhm.
And then it can be the other way around, that you feel like you have so many struggles in your past that you
Mhm.
don't know what to do. But I feel like prayer can kind of help, annihilate some of that fear,
Right.
be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer. Right.
Right.
And
Right.
so it should be able to kind of fuel you both. And that's something that I'm using in my relationship. Well, my husband is using.
Mhm.
He came into the relationship with a prayer routine better than mine, and I've been in the church so long. you know,
Right.
uh, and so just having that routine and the powerful prayer to be able to, have God in the center, helping you learn how to support one
Mhm.
another,
Right.
is definitely powerful.
And you have your own practice, right?
I am now fully licensed, but I still work for two different agencies. One, I'm an
Okay.
independent contractor, so I'm not quite in private practice yet.
Okay.
Uh, but I could be heading that way in the future.
Mm. I can see that. I can definitely see that. I might
Yeah.
be one of your clients one day. I don't know.
Oh boy.
I'm joking. But thank you so much. How can people find you if they want to get in contact with you or ask you questions or even check out your social media?
Sure. Instagram, you can find me on at Peaceful Oasis Counseling. You can find me there on Facebook as well as Peaceful Oasis Counseling.
Mhm.
Some of my name is still my maiden name with my email address, Melanie at MelanieJoyceJohnson.com. And also my website is still MelanieJoyceJohnson.com, where I have like some resources, blogs, especially on anxiety, really
Okay.
helping women overcome anxiety and trauma, Christian women. So definitely you can reach me there as well. So just reach out, what they say, DM me, DM
Yeah.
me, email me, snail mail. I'll take it all.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much. I'll definitely post your social media and your website in the bio, and I'll post this episode of the I Am Conquer Mountain podcast. This is Melanie J. Coates,
yeah,
and she is an LCPC. And we thank you so much for being here with us. Hang on as we go ahead and log off.
very good.